Are you ready? You think that you're better?
Bennett, shake and bake, touchdown!
Well, you better get ready.
Glad McConkey, he's got great McConkey.
Break it down!
Welcome to the College Football X with your hosts, John Nelson and John Wilkerson and Phil Cantor.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the X. College football's X, not the 10th, the X. Yes, really, X. Marks the spot or something like that. Sounds catchy, so we'll use it and go with that. We are the Online Sports Guys. This is our college football podcast. Me, OSG Phil, him, OSG Nelson, him, OSG Wilkie. We are three of these many online sports guys, and we're the ones designated to talk a little bit about the week that was in college football, week number 12. Not a lot of shockers this week, but we did have one game that we probably should go ahead and talk about off the top because it was, in some ways, the best game of the day, and in other ways, heartbreaker for the Oregon Ducks, as they are defeated by the visiting Washington Huskies 37-34 in a game that featured two quarterbacks throwing for a really large chunk of yards. Guys, I don't know if you got a chance to see any of that. Michael Penix Jr. did what he did a couple of years ago in Indiana and kind of almost single-handedly won a game.
I just, you look at Michael Penix and you wondered when Washington was just going to kind of wind him up and let him go. And I think that this was an example. We've seen Bo Nix and Oregon, seen good Bo Nix this year for the most part. We haven't seen the nutty Bo Nix that we've seen at times. But I think that you got to see what Auburn is missing in Bo Nix. And I think what Indiana wishes they had Michael Penix Jr. would.
Yeah, I really don't think this, other than the loss, I'm not sure if it really hurt Bo Nix's Heisman candidacy so much because right now we're so early in the process and there's still some games for him to win, to make an impression. But this was another chance for Michael Penix Jr. for have a coming out party. This time we're in the purple and gold of Washington. I've got to tip my hat off to Kalen DeBoer, the head coach of Washington.
Great job. Great job coaching this season from him.
Yeah, I mean, Washington was just off everybody's radar screen at the beginning of the year, and all of a sudden now they've made themselves noticed with a win over Oregon State last week. And Oregon State was ranked at the time, and now to defeat Oregon at Austin. I mean, that's an impressive accomplishment, and of course, it helps to have a quarterback of the capabilities of Michael Penix Jr. to transfer in. But we gotta salute Kalen DeBoer for what he's been doing in Seattle right now. We didn't expect us to be anywhere near where they are.
It was an interesting finish to this game. I don't know if you got to see the very end, and I didn't. I kind of read about it. Oregon had a chance to actually win. They didn't, but in large part, Bo Nix got hurt in a series late in the fourth quarter and had to sit out for a play. And they were just about on, I want to say they were on like the 5-yard line. Nix gets injured after trying to run the ball. Got replaced by Ty Thompson, who's his backup, and came back in a little bit later. But they ended up with a field goal on a drive when they had the ball inside the 10. They had a couple of turnovers as well. And Washington, to their credit, took advantage of everything that they got. This probably maybe knocks the Pac-12 out of college football playoff contention here, because you're still talking about Oregon, possibly Oregon and USC playing for the Pac-10 title. Pac-10. Listen to me. Pac-12 title, and USC hasn't exactly been that impressive either. But an interesting game. Another couple of interesting games. We were talking a little bit before the show. LSU went on the road to Arkansas in a game that probably finished not in a way that you would have expected. The Tigers ended up winning 13-10, with Arkansas going through not one but two quarterbacks in the game, and LSU not really playing that well. The Arkansas defense largely held the Tigers in check. But it clinched the SEC West for the Tigers. Who saw that coming?
Can we talk about? Yeah, I know we all did. Can we talk about Harold Perkins for a second?
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
and how above average a college football player he is.
As a freshman.
So, and I guess this is a part of our generational disconnect, where in the post-game press conference, Brian Kelly, and apparently Harold Perkins, sick as a dog. I mean, he was just not feeling it at all. And, if he was 100%, I'd hate to see what he would do at 100%, but he was sick and gets full of sacks. And Brian Kelly in the post-game press conference was trying to have a conversation with Perkins and was discussing, hey, MJ had one of his best games when he was sick. Perkins goes to him and says, "Who's MJ?"
Yeah.
We're like, okay, yeah, we're like Michael Jordan, go on YouTube. But, just the what you get with these individuals. And I think that what you're seeing with Brian Kelly and LSU is we're seeing what Brian Kelly over time in this season is able to do, integrating his system and what he wants and having players. And what we saw from the beginning of the year is out the door. All the stuff that we were discussing, all of the tropes, all the memes, all the jokes, they've gone by the wayside, Wilkie, and we're seeing what true freshmen have been able to do. You got B.J. Ojolari, who's been there a couple of seasons, but we'll get impact freshmen like Harold Perkins. That's a defense that can do things, and it gets you to the last game in conference play in Atlanta in the SEC title game.
Yeah, I'm willing to cut Harold Perkins some slack on that because 1997 is when we had the flu game with Michael Jordan, and Perkins was born in the 2000s. So
yeah, I believe he would have been -6 at that point.
But I hope this enlightened him. But now he was the key factor in the fourth quarter, really disturbing Cade Fortin from Arkansas in that fourth quarter, where he was involved in two plays that were lengthy replays about an incomplete pass or not. One went Arkansas's way, the other one didn't, and that was the ball game. Both defenses, I thought, played fantastic, had both offenses confused. Malik Hornsby was struggling against LSU's defense. Jalen Daniels was Arkansas got a pass rush on him and was able to contain that LSU offense. And as a Razorback myself, I was kind of very excited about it, but the offense just was awful. Or just couldn't get it done. I thought Cade Fortin came in and gave it a spark, but LSU was just too strong defensively. And I do think there was a little hangover from the Alabama game. It didn't help that it was 35 degrees in Fayetteville. And it was, it was really a game where the way it started out, you talked about Washington taking advantage of Oregon's turnovers. Arkansas just didn't do that at the beginning of the game when they had the field position, they got the turnovers, they got 3 points out of it. And you've got to get more production out of your offense when you have those gifts.
Surprisingly, LSU 2 weeks before the end of the season has clinched the SEC West. They will be facing the SEC East champion Georgia Bulldogs, who relatively coasted yet again with a big win, 45-19 versus Mississippi State. And really, the only reason Mississippi State even got it that close was because of a 63-yard punt return right before the halftime.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Kirby Smart probably sacrificed a GA in the locker room at the half after letting that happen, because you know that drove him absolutely crazy. But when you look at the University of Georgia and the talent pool that's there, you have Stetson Bennett version 4.0 from Southeast Georgia, Pierce County High School.
37-year-old Stetson Bennett.
True. And you've also got Ladd McConkey, who comes from North Murray High School. And I know a lot of folks, even in the state of Georgia, sat there when they brought in Stetson Bennett. They knew that for those that you'd have to be a real student of Georgia high school football to understand where Pierce County is, what Stetson Bennett did numbers-wise, that kind of stuff. And then understand for a North Murray program that was building what Ladd McConkey did as a receiver in the state of Georgia, knowing that just because your team may not be the best team in the world, if you're an athlete, you'll be found. And you saw that with Ladd McConkey with his big game that he had against Mississippi State. But I pity the poor GA that had at the half after that punt return, no question.
Yeah, Wilkie, I don't know if you saw the McConkey 70-yard touchdown run, but leading him around the end on that play was all 6'7", 200 and gazillion pound tight end Darnell Washington, who literally took down two players and just like, go away. Just let my guy run.
It's not fair. It literally is not fair what they have in some of these position groups. I mean, you've got Bowers and Washington at tight end, and it's not a fair fight, man. It really is not a fair fight, especially at tight end when you have freaks like Bowers and Washington part of your pattern.
Well, the LSU Georgia championship game will be an interesting one. You know, why play the next 2 weeks of the season, I guess, if it's already decided. But there's some bowl tie-ins you gotta shore up, and there's something called staying top of the rankings, I guess, is important. But you know, Georgia is cruising right now. They're playing at a level that nobody else is playing in right now. And obviously, if the Bulldogs can keep that up, they're going to cruise to the playoff. Because I really don't see any other team right now that is as poised and as good and as talented as Georgia is. You mentioned about the position groups. I mean, they can go. It seems like they can go 16 deep on every position, and not have a drop off. I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of what it looks like with Georgia, and it's a credit to Kirby Smart and his recruiting staff and his assistant coaches that can recognize a talent like that and fit them in and coach them up.
Yeah, and you're pretty much looking whichever team between Georgia and LSU wins the SEC, they're guaranteed a playoff spot. Georgia, if they don't win, still might sneak in. LSU, they either win or go home. But makes it interesting nonetheless. The other big conference with teams that have potential for college football playoff activity, Ohio State rolled over Indiana 56-14, and Michigan 34, Nebraska 3.
That would have been 30, 40 years ago.
Both those teams have to play each other still, so somebody's going to end up with a loss late in the season. That's kind of how their schedule plays every year.
Someone will be number 5, maybe number 4 when it comes to the CFP. I still think it's going to be 2 SEC teams and 2 B1Gs because that's what's best for the business.
I think TCU is going to have a pretty good, solid case, especially after knocking off Texas in a game that was surprisingly a defensive battle. TCU with a 17-10 win in Austin. They kept the Longhorns under control the entire game. Bijan Robinson did not do what he'd done to other teams. And for all the people who are saying TCU's not for real, or their offense is good, but their defense is terrible because they play in the Big 12. Well, they did the job against a pretty solid Texas Longhorn offense.
Well, this had all the feel of an old Southwest Conference game from 1974. It was fun for me to watch. I thought TCU did a great job of containing Bijan Robinson. Didn't get any chunk plays. Quentin Evers was, had a hand in his face or somebody flying around him the whole time. He didn't have the clear lanes to throw out of. Max Dugan's got to be somewhere in the a list of Heisman Trophy candidates right now. He's done everything you could possibly can. Now he's got a big road win, and that's the key about TCU here. They got the win on the road in Austin, and this was, we talked about last week how this is kind of the meat of the TCU schedule. Really, when you look at what they got left against Baylor, and at Baylor hosting Iowa State, they really got through the worst part of that 3-game trek they've got coming up. Baylor's going to be tough because the Bears aren't that bad. I think TCU is much more talented, but they got through the big one, and it's just got to guard against the hangover against Baylor, get the job done, and TCU's in a good spot now to break into the playoff.
Yeah, they run the table, John. They're in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the CFP will probably do it begrudgingly. I'm not denying, trust me, I'm not denying what we're seeing from TCU. I'm just looking at it strictly from a business executive, TV executive mind frame. I'm not. Trust me, I am not looking at TCU, and I'm not poo-pooing them from what they've been able to do at all. I'm just saying what's best for business. If I'm a TV executive or a bowl executive, it's those blue bloods. I don't know how many folks are going to get wrapped up into the notion of TCU. Yeah, let's see TCU in the top 4 CFP. So that's my caveat in all of this. It is not a negative on TCU. I'm just trying to look at it strictly from perspective when it comes to what you're looking at.
Wilkie, I know it sounds good from a conspiracy theory perspective to say that, well, ESPN is going to say you can't take this team, you have to take one of the blue bloods, even though they've won, was it like 3 or 4, even 5 win over ranked teams over the course of the season, and they're undefeated. I just can't imagine a scenario where they're going to be able to get away with that and say, oh, yeah, TCU, congratulations, you had a great year. You beat every single team that you played, including 5 teams ranked in the top 20, but you're not good enough for us.
Well, if you got Max Dugan in the Heisman Trophy talk, and really TCU now has kind of got the national attention, especially with the win over Texas. Now it's impossible to not include them if they run the table and win the Big 12 championship game. So that's what Sonny Dykes' team has got to do. Just got to take care of business, and they're in. And obviously Georgia's going to be there if they run the table. Even if they lose to LSU, I don't see them dropping out of the top 4. Getting 2 SEC teams in, Tennessee kind of controls their own destiny there. You'd like to think Michigan and Ohio State will cancel each other out when they play. One will be canceled out. I'm just not sure. I think there's still a scenario where the loser of that game gets in, and a lot of it's because of their reputation. It really depends on what that committee is. I mean, if it's a blowout win by one team, then probably you've got an argument there if one gets in. But if it's a tight, close to Ohio State Michigan game, a 17-14 type or a 1-point win, I think it'd be really hard to keep the loser out of the playoff. Obviously with TCU playing so well, but I just think it'd be a hard time to keep the loser of that Ohio State Michigan game out.
We could talk a little bit more about this in the second half of the show when we talk about college football playoff rankings, the AP rankings, and looking ahead at the schedule for next week. One of the other teams in that conversation we mentioned the name, the Tennessee Volunteers, Tennessee 66, Missouri 24.
Yeah, it was a good bloodletting for the Vols. Poor Missouri. They're the team that got they had to take out on somebody, right? Might as well be like Wigwitz, it seemed.
So is Hendon Hooker a part of your grouping in New York City right now?
Oh, no question.
Yeah.
So you've got
Little
Dugan,
concerned.
you've got
Little
Dugan, you've got
concerned
Hooker,
about.
who else?
A little concerned about ending the season with 2 road games out South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt gets their first SEC win since the 1870s when they beat Kentucky. Um, so obviously they're feeling good about themselves, and it's a rivalry game. Just a little concerned about finishing 2 games on the road. We all know how tough it is to play at South Carolina. There'll be more Tennessee fans in Nashville than there'll be Vandy fans, but still it's a rivalry game, and now they're feeling good about themselves.
Yeah, we talked a little earlier about Oregon in the Pac-12. UCLA was a team with an outside shot at squeezing their way into the conversation until they lost this week. Arizona beating them 34-28 in Los Angeles, knocking them out of contention. But there are a couple of upsets here on the bottom tier of the top 25 that were kind of surprising to me. One was Boston College beating NC State, 21-20. Did not see that coming. UCF with a nice win over Tulane, 38-31. UCF may end up being that team that squeaks into the top 25 and gets that at-large group of 5 invite to the playoff. In Illinois losing again, the caps off a Cinderella. Purdue takes them down 31-24. But Wilkie, you mentioned Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt takes down Kentucky 24-21. I'm not even sure there's a good word I can come up with to describe that, because would not have that. Not a game I would have predicted.
No, and especially since it was in Lexington. Credit Clark Lee in getting the Commodores up for this game, and they hung around. Vanderbilt did, and got it done. And so hats off to the Vanderbilt Commodores, and to get that win over Kentucky. Couple of teams I wanted to bring up that we always look for teams that have gotten better from September to November, and of course LSU fits that category. So they're in the title game. One is Notre Dame. Good win over Navy. Navy was fired up.
They had to hold on to their shorts at the end.
Yep, they always play Notre Dame tough, even though Notre Dame's usually the most talented team. And the Irish got it done. And then John, take out your earbuds. But I gotta say Florida State is now starting to really impress me. I watched a little bit of that against Syracuse. They go into the whatever dome it's called now, and
they play.
JMA Wireless.
Yeah, and hold the Orange to a field goal and just boat race them. And again, that offensive line of Florida State has really impressed me. I think that's been a problem with that program for 15 years. And but the Seminoles are getting hot at the right time. They're setting themselves up for 2023 to be a factor again.
Mm-hmm. They are.
Yeah, and I think what you're seeing is, regardless of my own personal feelings about the head coach of the program, I think what you're seeing is an administration and an athletic department that are showing patience with a coach. And you're purging everyone from the Willie Taggart era, and you're finally getting in the athletes that you want work into your system. And so they've stayed with Mike Norvell. You're getting those cycles of your athletes in quotation marks, and you're seeing what Mike Norvell wants to do in the program, and you're seeing the results of that in the ACC. So, I mean, not a surprise at all that, hey, it's amazing what happens when you're patient with a head coach and you let him kind of do his thing and leave him alone with expectations not being
It's funny how things tend to work a lot better if you find a decent coach and you give them the opportunity to actually grow a program instead of panicking at the first sign of losing games. And speaking of losing games, arguably the coach with the biggest contract buyout in the history of the world and college football, Jimbo Fisher, he's now 3-7.
I'm
That's
enjoying that to no end, by the way. And they finished with UMass and LSU. You could have a 4-8 ATM squad in College Station.
You would, by the way, John, you have my deepest sympathies for having to actually sit in the stadium and watch that Auburn Texas A&M game, a game won by Auburn 13-10. And I want to know, is it true that they had to do something at the end of the game to wake up everybody in the stadium up?
Absolutely not. No, it was the inverse. From the absolute beginning, the place was sold out. Basically, it was sold out first and foremost, and you had the energy level was there from the student body, and most of the alums left at halftime because it was blanking freezing outside, and it was in the 50s, and you had a stiff 20-mile-an-hour wind the entire time. So
You said stiff.
I did. Yeah, that's football porn, by the way. When you have the conditions that were there, a lot of the adults left at halftime. I was not one of them, and neither was the boss. But I give the student body a lot of credit. They stayed for the entire game. They were there to keep the defense, to give the noise when it was asked, all those kinds of things. And I think that what you saw in this game was a universal cathartic release of emotions. And what you've seen in 12 days is what an individual can do for a program versus what an individual did to a program. I think that having Cadillac Williams, and this is the requested viewing for everybody, go on to the SEC Network social media account. The post-game interview that Cole Kubel did with Coach Cadillac Williams, I think it speaks volumes as to what the Auburn fan base was looking for from their coach, and they got that in Cadillac Williams because they sure as hell weren't getting it from Brian Harsin. You were getting the emotion, the understanding of what football means to the program, and I mean the student section. Seriously, the video is there. The student section did not leave the entire time. Yes, it was painful to see what Connor Wigman was doing offensively. They didn't clear 200 yards of offense until the final drive that they had in the game. And I think the game plan in those conditions was pretty solid. We're going to run the ball, tank, it's going to be tank, it's going to be all the running backs. You're going to eat the clock, you're going to get out of town. And they did that by winning 13.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's a group of alums at Texas A&M or boosters or even people in the athletic department that, knowing that the buyout is so much, perhaps make Jimbo Fisher's life a living hell for a while to force him to resign or take some kind of action, because that's what you're left with now. I mean, if they're so unsatisfied with what's the direction the program is going, and right now 3-7 is not what was in the plans, and it wasn't supposed to be a rebuilding year. It was supposed to be he's in his fifth year now.
You got these top 10 recruiting classes consistently. There should be no rebuilding.
Exactly. This is his fifth year on the program. They should be contending for SEC West and national titles, and it's not done. So I'm just wondering, what tactics, if they really don't want him back, what tactics will be going on internally, externally? Will he be invited to any of the quarterback club luncheons during the off season? And I can't imagine what spring football and those pressers are going to be like, especially during recruiting for this year. But John, you were at Auburn, Texas A&M. My son was at Alabama Ole Miss, and I thought he might be going to a game where he's actually going to be able to storm the field. Didn't happen, and because Alabama won. But I thought he might be part of that group that tear down the goalposts.
Yeah. As for my thoughts on Texas A&M, I have 3 words to say. Karma is a bitch. With that being
Agreed.
said, one last shout out I want to make before we wrap up things here on the first half of the show, and that's UConn Huskies.
All eligible.
1 week after Kansas becomes bowl eligible, UConn does it. And they did it by beating a ranked team in the Liberty Flames.
Well, I think that was a Liberty letdown game considering what happened the week before.
Yeah, they were a little hungover for their Arkansas.
Hey, it's 6 wins. That UConn hasn't had 6 wins in the last decade, never mind the last 6 years. So to see them do that, good for them.
More Magic. And they've got Army left, hosting Army. That's all they got left. They can get 7 wins. Perhaps they have to win the bowl game.
Pinstripe Bowl, baby. Here they come.
Woo! All right, guys, that's a good wrap up of the week that was in college football. When we come back for the second half of the show, we're going to talk about rankings. The new AP poll is out. We'll talk about that. The college football playoff poll is due on Tuesday, and we'll take a look ahead at what's coming up in the week ahead. All that and more when we return for the second half of the College Football X. You're listening to the College Football X on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Please like and subscribe.
Warning. Orthopedic surgeons are seeing an increase in overuse injuries when young athletes perform the same repetitive stressful motions over and over. Pitching, tennis, weight training, even long swimming workouts can cause overuse trauma that may require surgery. If your kids play and train hard, visit orthoinfo.org or stopsportsinjuries.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine. Warning. Orthopedic surgeons are seeing an increase in overuse injuries when young athletes perform the same repetitive stressful motions over and over. Pitching, tennis, weight training, even long swimming workouts can cause overuse trauma that may require surgery. If your kids play and train hard, visit orthoinfo.org or stopsportsinjuries.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Thanks for sticking around, folks. You have made it to the second half of the X. The College Football X, our college football podcast here on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network, featuring us, the online sports guys, OSG Wilkie, OSG Nelson, me, OSG Phil. We are just but 3 of the people who like to talk about all things sports, and in this case, college football. Guys, we went through the week that was here in the first half of the show. In the second half, I'm going to talk a little bit about rankings. The AP College Football poll is out. No big surprises here, really, if you read through the list. Everybody's pretty much exactly where you think they would be. Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, TCU 4, and Tennessee at number 5.
Yeah, what I'm going to be interested in when the college football playoff poll comes out is where Tennessee and Southern Cal will be.
Mm-hmm.
I think LSU might be on the outside looking in between those two, but if I see Southern Cal in the 5 or 6 spot, that tells me they're still in play, especially thinking about UCLA and then when they end the season. If they can wrap up the season winning out, that would be the team on the outside looking in, waiting for the Michigan-Ohio State matchup and whether they can overtake one of those, the loser of that game. So in Tennessee's the same way. If they're 5 and 6 and they're still in play. So that's what I'm going to be looking for when the playoff rankings come out Tuesday night.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I want to see who's lurking. I want to see who's in that 5, 6, 7 that they still want to give some kind of a chance, but things have to fall a certain way, one way or another. So, like I said, like you, Wilkie, I'm looking for the lurkers just below the 4. We can all sit there and try to plug things in one way or the other.
Yeah, the AP's got LSU at 6, or USC at 7. Alabama's still hanging on there at 8, even though they barely beat Ole Miss this past weekend. they don't really finish particularly strong. They've got us and P, and then they play the Iron Bowl against Auburn, where anything could happen.
Eyes open, baby.
Clemson at 9, and Utah coming in at number 10. That one's a little bit of a surprise to me. But, yeah, anybody really in that top 10 still theoretically has a shot with a couple of weeks left to go in the season. But there's a lot to talk about and a lot of football to be played. You think the college football playoff poll is going to kind of come out the same way? Because for me, you're talking about, I think the first 4 teams in the AP poll are probably going to be the first 4 in the college football playoff poll.
I'm just curious to see where TCU ends up in the playoff poll. And the AP poll are 4. Wouldn't be shocked if they're 3 ahead of Michigan. But that's kind of apples and oranges. But Georgia should be 1, Ohio State 2, simply because of the eye test. And I'm curious to see if TCU is in the 3 spot with Michigan in 4. If that's a little different, but again, it doesn't really matter where you are in the top 4. It's just getting in the top 4.
Yeah, and John, I think LSU, for all the pretty wins that they've had this season, they're 8-2. If they don't beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, I don't think they're in. I don't think they're even a factor here.
No, but that's why I'm looking at Tennessee and Alabama as lurkers outside the top 4 of the CFP. I want to see where they're positioned, and we can sit there and plug in. Okay, if this, then this. If this, then this. If say Georgia beats LSU, then what do Tennessee and Alabama do when it comes to the CFP? What lurking positions are they in? Is somebody in a 5 that could hopscotch a team at 4 to give you 2 SEC teams, that kind of a thing? So that's what I'm looking at, is where are those extraneous Big Ten teams? Where are those extraneous SEC teams? How do they fit? And how much of a crowded house is it at 5, 6, and 7, especially as we get to the championship week?
Yeah, I mean, Wilkie, I think you probably would agree. I think Tennessee is that SEC wildcard team. Should, for some reason, LSU beat Georgia or Georgia win, and they're looking for another 4th team to have to make it into the playoff, if the deck of cards all kind of falls to crap, Tennessee's got the advantage over in Alabama. I don't think there's even going to be a debate there.
They do have the advantage, but again, I don't like the way they're closing out the season at South Carolina and at Vanderbilt. As good as Tennessee is, it's a tough environment in Columbia, and it's a rivalry game against Vandy, although they're superiorly talented over Vandy. But they run the table there, and LSU pulls off a stunner. And if they pull it off and by more than 2 touchdowns or more, then I think you're looking at Tennessee sneaking in. But look at Southern Cal, because you got UCLA coming up, and if the Trojans are able to boat race the Bruins, then I think you guys look toward Southern Cal. And again, Southern Cal they're finishing up strong at UCLA, and then they host Notre Dame to close out the season, which is a hot football team right now. And we all know the USC Notre Dame rivalry and how special that is. I mean, you have 2 rivalry games close out the season. If they can get an impressive win over the Bruins and back that up with another impressive win over the Irish, which to me I think has people's attention right now, you got to look at Southern Cal as being that team that might break in. Of course, they got to win their title game, but that it's really between Tennessee and Southern Cal, and both have good reasons as to why they should be included in the top 4 if one of those teams stubs their toe. I think probably Southern Cal has the argument over Tennessee simply because they can win their conference.
It's a big hurdle to climb. UCLA, Notre Dame, and possibly Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. If they win all 3 of those with USC's defense, I think that's going to be a stretch, but it's a possibility too. I wouldn't rule it out. Yeah, they would have a good argument if TCU falls. Ohio State and Michigan, one of those two teams is going to end up with an L. And then,
but I think the point margin in that loss would also be another indicator. Like
yes,
I've been saying, if it's a close game, I still think that they're still a part of the discussion. Both of them are still a part of the discussion. They won't be separated by a whole lot of margin. If it's a blowout, then one will definitely drop out of the discussion, and the other will stay probably number 2.
Yeah, everything's staying as it is. I think right now, if we had to make that decision today, I think Georgia, Ohio State, or Michigan and TCU are your locks, and then it's just a matter of who's that number 4 team. Guys, let's take a look ahead at the upcoming schedule. Another busy week in college football as we kind of creep towards, I can't believe I'm saying this, but as we creep closer towards Thanksgiving, where'd the time go? Good Lord.
No, man. Oh.
We've got your typical slate of MAC action on Tuesday and Wednesday. No particularly great games ahead during the week. On Saturday, that gets when things business picks up a little bit. Not a lot of ranked teams in action against each other. Really, if you go down the list, the early kickoffs, on paper, Illinois and Michigan, I would think that's an easier win for Michigan now than it probably was 3 or 4 weeks ago, as Illinois is kind of in a spiral.
They got figured out, yeah.
Why on God's green earth is Alabama playing Austin Peay?
Homecoming, senior day. You got to have something.
In week 12.
And they wrote a large check to Austin Peay.
Oh, that's just
Governor's soccer and track program just got funded.
Yeah, that's one thing you could definitely say about that game, without a question. Just looking down the list here, Georgia goes to previously ranked number 24 Kentucky after losing to Vanderbilt last week. I'm quite sure the Wildcats are going to drop out of the top 25. I was about to say here's an intriguing matchup. Here's an intriguing matchup if this was 2008, and that would be Miami at Clemson. However, it's not.
I think we know who's going to win that one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's just a matter of by how much. Here's a good one for you. The Texas Longhorns make the trip into Lawrence, Kansas to take on the soon-to-be bowl-eligible, if not already bowl-eligible, Kansas Jayhawks.
6-4 versus 6-4, baby. Lance Leipold, Coach of the Year.
Woo!
And that is your
Orange Longhorns coming into Lawrence. It's going to be a packed house, lots of emotion. I tend to like Kansas in this game because they need a signature win, and this would be it.
I would love every minute of it.
Yeah, I think if you look down the slate of games the coming week, without a doubt, the biggest on the radar game with the most potential impact is, USC at UCLA, game at the Rose Bowl on Saturday night.
Yeah, well, to me, one of the great rivalries of college football. I love that rivalry, the inter-city rivalry between the two LA schools. How many legends have come out of that rivalry? How many great games have come out of that rivalry? And Southern Cal's is on a mission. I mean, if they win this impressively, they've helped themselves as far as the playoff picture. They've checked one box as to break into the playoffs. So I think there's a lot of incentive for the Trojans to put out their best effort.
And at the same time, after what happened with Arizona and UCLA really could upset the apple cart in the Pac-10, 12, 14. If they end up getting the win, they could just completely ruin their rival season. Absolutely. Blow it up. Blow it up.
It blowed up real good.
Mm-hmm.
The other game featuring two ranked teams would be Utah at Oregon. Oregon looking for a bounce back after a really, really rough game against Washington. And Utah, as Utah is wont to do, gets better as the season goes on. We just talked about them being ranked number 10 in this week's AP poll. Not as much on the line here with Oregon going down last week, but an interesting game nevertheless.
No, to me, it's appointment television, Utah and Oregon. Two, programs that just, suffered a couple of close losses that kind of cost them a chance at a national championship. But there's gonna be some plastic popping in that game. Two very physical teams, and that's a game I want to be watching. And whoever wins that game, they're gonna feel good about themselves. They're gonna get a good New Year's Bowl out of it.
Pac-12 after dark, 10:30.
Yeah.
10:30 on the 4-letter. So get your caffeine ready for that one. That one's gonna.
Late night party. Anything else that kind of jumps off the board for you guys here as we kind of wind things down on the show?
Well, obviously a couple of really good rivalry games that have kind of now nowhere near the radar right now. Stanford and Cal in the big game. It's 40 years since the since the band is on the field. So expect to see that flashed around a lot this week. Can't believe it's been 40 years that happened. So you'll be hearing a lot of Joe Starkey saying the band's on the field this week. The other is the Bedlam series is this week between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State.
Oh.
And we're winding down that rivalry with Oklahoma joining the SEC in a few years. I'm just curious to see what kind of mood OSU will be in, knowing that their big brother is leaving them, and how much pushing and shoving will be going on, not with the players, but with some of the Cowboy and Sooner fan bases.
7-3 versus 5-5.
Yeah, I was going to say before the season that would have been a hell of a matchup looking ahead. Where we're at now, not so much.
No, it's flying way under the radar.
And I mean, you look at the rest of the grid. You're looking at a lot of homecoming games, a lot of senior day games. Teams that are right on the cusp of being bowl eligible that need either one win or two, and they've got to figure out what they need to do to get there.
Yeah.
Teams that are right off the edge of the top 25, and one of the ones that going to be right there for me, Utah Tech and BYU. That is appointment television. 3:30 Saturday afternoon. Utah Tech and BYU. Forward to that one. Coastal Carolina and Virginia, 9-1 and 3-7. I mean, this could be where Coastal Carolina goes double-digit by going into Charlottesville and
knocking off a really, really bad Virginia team.
Yeah, no doubt. And
what's it say for the Dabo Swinney coaching tree? When Tony Elliott and Brett Venables take jobs and they end up having two of the worst seasons their well-regarded schools have had in decades.
Well, Tony Elliott's playing with still some of Bronco Mendenhall's players, even though they got some transfers to come in. But that was a tough situation at UVA. Why don't we go to the other side of the state of Virginia, why is Virginia Tech going to Lynchburg to play Liberty? I mean, it's a tough enough year for the Hokies.
Yeah,
right now.
Actually, that's not the other side of the state. It's about a 90-minute drive.
I've done the drive. I know exactly. I've done it many times. But they're playing in Lynchburg against Liberty, and Virginia Tech's having a tough year. They've already lost at Old Dominion. Are you going to take an L at Lynchburg? Probably. It's just been, tough times at Blacksburg right now.
Would not be a shocker at all to see that happening.
I mean,
So-
look at the homecoming games that we have here, the Senior Day games. Got Austin P and Alabama, East Tennessee State at Mississippi State, Mass at Texas A&M. ATM is going to be fighting hard to get. They're going to have to beat LSU to be a 5-win team. We mentioned Virginia Tech and Liberty is an odd. North Alabama is at Memphis. Let's see, what were the other ones? Coastal and Virginia talked about that. Utah Tech talked about that.
Louisiana making the trip to Tallahassee to take on your Fighting Seminoles.
Paycheck game. Mentioned Western Kentucky and Tigers going to Auburn. So that one, Senior Day, and one more that was streaming Senior Day game, but it's either rivalry or New Mexico State, Missouri. That was the other one. You got a lot of Senior Day games coming this Saturday.
Yes, you do. Should be an interesting week, as they always are, guys. What do you say we wrap up this week's episode?
Sounds like
We
a
have
plan.
talked long enough. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Hopefully you got a little bit of insight as to what happened this past week and you can expect to see in the week ahead as we kind of get into the home stretch of college football. So for OSG Nelson, for OSG Wilkie, I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Hopefully Brother Marty will be able to join us here in the next week or two, depending on the schedule with Cleveland Browns.
Yes.
So for the entire team, thanks for tuning in. Have a great week, and we will see you again hopefully next week. Enjoy. Bye.